shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is end-time newsman Rick Wiles.
This is True News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. Today is Tuesday, February 10, 2015. Presidential actor Barry Soetoro, the Indonesian-schooled Muslim who publicly goes by the alias Barack Hussein Obama, accused Russian President Vladimir Putin last night of trying to redraw Europe's borders at the barrel of a gun. Mr. Soetoro revealed that he had ordered the Pentagon to consider arming the Ukrainian military. Mr. Soetoro, a loyal supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood, stood alongside German leader Angela Merkel in the White House Oval Office. Barry delivered a stern ultimatum to the Russian president. Wednesday is Mr. Putin's last chance to accept Barry's terms of surrender over Ukraine. Mrs. Merkel and French President François Hollande will meet Mr. Putin tomorrow in Minsk, the capital of Belarus, to formally present the Western peace deal to end the conflict over Ukraine. So, how will Russian leaders interpret a U.S. decision to arm Ukraine? The Moscow Times published this headline today. Quote, Russia would see U.S. moves to arm Ukraine as declaration of war, unquote. Do I need to explain it? One Russian defense expert told the Moscow Times that Russia would see the U.S. as a direct participant in the Ukrainian civil war. An unnamed member of the Russian Defense Ministry's Public Advisory Board warned that Moscow would respond asymmetrically against Washington and its allies on other fronts. Another Russian defense analyst said Moscow would not sit by calmly to see what happens. He said Russia will counteract. One Russian source told the Moscow Times that the Kremlin may give in to Chinese PLA request for high-tech Russian weapons capable of doing serious damage to U.S. naval forces in the Pacific. This source also said Russia may encourage and militarily support an Iranian attack on Saudi Arabia. Military.com reported today that the Pentagon deployed a dozen A-10 Thunderbolt attack aircraft to Europe in an escalating showdown with Russia over Ukraine. The Warthogs, built by Fairchild Republic Aircraft Company in the 1970s, departed the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona and flew to Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany in support of Operation Atlantic Resolve. NATO announced on February 5th that the military alliance will form a 5,000-troop international spearhead force that would be supported by air, sea, and special operations forces. The lead element of the force will be ready to deploy within 48 hours of getting the call from NATO commanders, and the entire unit would move out within a week. The NATO Rapid Response Force will eventually swell to 30,000 troops from Europe, Great Britain, Canada, and the United States. Ashton Carter, the CFR policy wonk tapped by Barry Soetoro to be his Secretary of Defense, has been talking tough to U.S. senators about Russia. He rejects the notion that Russia is entitled to a sphere of influence in Eastern Europe near its border. DefenseNews.com obtained a copy of Mr. Carter's 42-page statement prepared for the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee. Mr. Carter told DefenseNews.com that NATO should help Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine build their security capacity and military interoperability with NATO. As Mrs. Merkel and Mr. Hollande traveled to Minsk to deliver Mr. Obama's ultimatum to Mr. Putin, over 2,000 Russian soldiers started large-scale military exercises near Russia's border with Ukraine. Another 600 Russian soldiers started conducting combat training in the Crimean Peninsula, and an additional 2,500 Russian troops of the Russian Pacific Fleet and Joint Forces are also prepping for combat operations. Meanwhile, a mysterious Lithuanian NGO known as Blue Yellow has begun providing military training to Ukrainian soldiers. A more alarming statement from Russia came from Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev. He told a Russian newspaper today that the Ukrainian crisis has nothing to do with Ukraine. He accused the U.S. of using Ukraine to bait Russia into a war with the United States. Mr. Patrushev also said the goal is to split Russia and force a change of power in Moscow. He said, quote, "The situation in Ukraine has been used as a pretext for active deterrence of our country. Ukraine itself does not interest the U.S. Its aim is to weaken our positions. Americans are trying to involve the Russian Federation in an interstate military conflict, achieve a change of power, using Ukrainian events, and ultimately dismember our country," end of quote. He also said that the West is coveting Russia's vast natural resources, such as oil and natural gas. He cited former U.S. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, who, he said, believed that Russian territories are too big to be managed by Moscow. The Russian Security Council Secretary said, quote, "In their opinion, such distribution of natural resources is unjust, and other states need to be given free access to them," end of quote. And Mr. Patrushev formerly served as director of the FSB, the Federal Security Bureau. That was the successor to the KGB. Another close ally of Vladimir Putin, Alexei Pushkov, a member of the Russian parliament, told members of the European Parliament that an all-out war could happen if the United States supplies weapons to Ukraine. He also accused Arizona U.S. Senator John McCain of wanting to start wars everywhere in the world. Now, if you want to know my opinion on Ukraine, this next story is the real reason for the buildup of armies in Europe. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are set to ratify in the coming months an agreement on the creation of an alternative to the World Bank, which is controlled by the international banking cabal in London and New York, namely the Rothschilds family. Russia's finance minister said that Moscow is racing to ratify the agreement by March. The real battle is for control of the world's financial system. The Rothschilds banking dynasty has a serious competitor for the first time in centuries. And in my opinion, they are quite willing to kill billions of people in World War III before they surrender their power and wealth over the world. Once again, Barry Soetoro, the Muslim in the White House, will give the U.S. Congress his proposal for authorization for the use of military force against ISIS. Now listen to this. Obama's plan to fight ISIS will place strict limits on the type of U.S. ground forces that can be deployed against ISIS. Furthermore, Obama's limitations will remain in place until 2018, which means he will tie the hands of the next U.S. president to fight against ISIS. Whose side is Mr. Obama on? FreeBeacon.com reported that the political consulting firm founded by Obamanista advisor David Axelrod has been deeply involved in the political campaign of Nigerian presidential candidate General Muhammadu Buhari. The retired general is running against incumbent Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan. President Jonathan is a devout Christian. General Buhari is a devout Sunni Muslim, as is Barack Obama and the Saudi royal family. General Buhari's political party, APC, has been linked to Boko Haram, the violent Muslim commandos who have butchered thousands of Nigerian Christians and burned down hundreds of Christian churches. Mr. Axelrod, who resembles Adolf Hitler, is the founder of Chicago-based AKPD. The political consulting firm has been advising the Nigerian party, APC, in its efforts to defeat Nigeria's Christian president. Once again, I ask you the question, whose side is Mr. Obama on? Because everywhere you look, he's helping radical jihadist Muslims. The Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. He's helping the Muslim candidate for president of Nigeria. He's helping the Iranians build their nuclear bomb. He's helping the Muslims in America dig deeper into American culture. Everywhere you look, Barack Hussein Obama is helping the Islamic takeover of the world. In a new book to be released soon by Time, Mr. Axelrod, who was the Obama campaign manager in 2008, admitted that he advised Barack Obama in 2008 to lie about his support for homosexual marriage because black churches are strongly opposed to it. Mr. Obama campaigned in 2008 as a supporter of traditional marriage. But Mr. Axelrod told Time, or I should say in the book to be published by Time, he said that Barack Obama always supported gay marriage, but deliberately misled American voters in order to win the White House in 2008. In other words, if you like traditional marriage, you can keep traditional marriage. I'm Rick Wiles. This is True News. War correspondent Gordon Thomas will be here when I return. Don't go away.
You're listening to True News, the end-time newscast. Rick will return after this announcement.
This is Max McLean. Tired of the journey? Consider this promise of renewal. Listen to the Bible from Isaiah 40. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. For youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. From Isaiah 40, listen to the Bible. It's great for the soul.
Hear more at radiobible.org.
This is True News, your alternative source for global news, analysis, and commentary. I'm Rick Wiles. True News is distributed on our website, TrueNews.com, our True News app, iTunes, blogtalkradio.com, YouTube, nearly 100 AM, FM radio stations, including a new affiliate in the Philippines, and 6 world band shortwave radio stations. We reasonably estimate that over 500,000 people listen to True News every weekday. Now, the fastest growing method for distribution for True News is our app. We are quickly approaching the 100,000 download mark. Have you downloaded the True News app? It's absolutely free. Go to TRUNEWS.com, TRUNEWS, TRUNEWS.com. Look for the smartphone icon on the right side of our website, and then you can listen to True News anytime, anywhere, on any device. And here's one more reason that you need to download the True News app. We are assembling all of the radio programs I've recorded since we started in 1999. I've lost count of the number of interviews I've recorded. It's somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 interviews. The best interviews will be categorized by name, topic, and date, and the archives will be available to everybody who has downloaded the True News app. Now, we're still working on the archives, so give us some time, and I'll let you know when it's ready. Now, throughout the 16 years, there have been many interviews that I privately tagged as an instant classic. And one guest who always became an instant classic is on the telephone right now. I've not interviewed him for many years. Mr. Gordon Thomas is a well-respected former BBC correspondent. He has written 53 books published in over 30 nations in dozens of languages with sales exceeding 45 million copies. 4 of his books were made into movies. Mr. Thomas is a leading expert on the sinister world of secret intelligence and espionage. His books include Gideon Spies, Mossad's Secret Warriors. His latest book is The Pope's Jews, the Vatican's secret plan to save Jews from the Nazis. This is the first time I've talked with Gordon, I would say in at least 10 years, and it's a pleasure to have him on the telephone right now. Gordon Thomas, it's an honor to have you back on True News.
Well, I'm delighted to be back, and thank you for inviting me.
Yes, sir. What have you been doing for the past 10 years? Have we lost touch with each other?
Well, I've been doing a book. It's taken me a long time to do this one. It's a story of women agents in World War II, and including they worked for OSS and, of course, for SOE in Britain. And these were the women who were parachuted into occupied Europe. Some were dropped into Berlin, believe it or not, during the war. And tracking them down, trying to get them, find them all, has taken me, good 3 years now. But the book is getting ready to come next year, I hope. But it's all about them. They're quite amazing women. And they operated in England from an extraordinary airfield. The airfield was so secret that Churchill called it the most secret airfield we have. It's in the middle of England, the airfield was. It was disguised as a farm. And they called in one of Britain's leading illusionists who had the job of turning that airfield into a farm. And it's extraordinary. I mean, the runways were painted black, and they appeared from the air to have weeds growing on them, and you couldn't think you could fly a plane down them, but they did. And then all the hangars were given thatched roofs, so they looked like cottages, and the whole place was disguised. And this is where the women were brought when they'd been trained for their missions. And they would be taken off in little planes, Lysanders, these small little planes they used to have in those days, then Halifaxes and 1 or 2 other bigger planes. And they would go on these missions and be dropped off into Europe. And their stories are amazing. I mean, a number, of course, were to die in concentration camps, but those who have survived are quite remarkable women. And I'm working on that, and I'm still pounding away at it.
Good. This is a fascinating theme for a book. Has anybody ever assembled these stories?
Sorry?
I said, has anybody ever assembled these stories about the female spies?
No, not that I know of. And I've interwoven it, of course, with intelligence, because it's very important to understand what was going on behind them. And I've been to their training camps where they were in Scotland, where they had to, the training they had was 7 months altogether. That included having to climb mountains, knew how to use parachutes, they could shoot with Sten guns, and so on. They're amazing, these women were. And their stories they haven't been told, no. And I thought, a number are dead, of course, but the ones who are alive, well, I've managed to talk to them.
Some of them are still alive.
Now, in their 80s.
You've talked to, Gordon, you've talked to some of these women, they're still alive.
Only a few.
Wow.
But those who are alive are in their 70s or 80s. And, they have memories and they have documents, they have pictures of themselves. And, when I realized what they were doing, my God, I think that's real bravery, Because when they were sent, Churchill said, when he became Prime Minister, let's set Europe alight, meaning, against the Nazis. And to do that, the SOE was formed, that was along with the OSS run in from America. And they joined forces, and they formed their own sort of underground army, if you like. And they went into occupied France particularly, where they organized the resistance forces to fight the Nazis. These women learned how to blow up trains. It was amazing. And they could do things that you'd never think. They could also break into houses. They learned how to be, all that stuff they learned in their training. And they were trained down in a place called Beaulieu, which is in the middle of England, which is the biggest state. And there they learned their tactics. They learned how to use seduction. The average age of the woman at the time, is on top of the 1940s now, was between 18 and 24. And they all spoke French or one of the other European languages. They had volunteers. They'd all volunteered to do this. And they were trained by all sorts of people. And they were trained by burglars, by housebreakers. They were trained all the tactics they'd need. They were also trained to do silent killing, which was with a knife. My God, you think. They did it. And they organized the French resistance, as I said, and they took it further. And then when the war moved to the Far East, they were operating out there against the Japanese. Quite extraordinary. So I thought this story has never been told properly. And I thought, yes, I will tell this story, but it's going to take me another year to do it properly, and it'll be ready. Then we will have another book to talk about.
Gordon, can you give us an example of one particular female spy and tell us just a little bit about things that... Can you give us an example of a specific female spy? Tell us a true story about one particular spy? Anything come to mind?
I'm just thinking. They were sent often to kill somebody, a Nazi leader. I don't mean Hitler, but I mean in areas they would go in and they would lead their resistance team. First, they were trained to jump by parachute, and they had a special jumpsuits made for them, and they carried everything with them. Goodness me. They also carried, which is interesting, what was known as the L pill. This was the lethal pill they would take if they were caught. And they were the pills were concealed in their teeth. They'd bite on their teeth and they'd be gone. They were full of poison to kill them. And they were told, kill yourselves rather than come back, because if you're caught and taken away for torture, you'll be tortured. Well, a number were tortured. A number were of the women, when they were caught, were put alive into the gas chambers, not even, just literally sewn in when they've been tortured in various camps in Nazi Germany. But they went in and they did their operations, and then they had to be brought out. And this was done. They were sometimes flown out, or sometimes they trekked across into Spain, and so on. But these women worked like men. They were astonishing, the things they can do. And I've been very lucky because I've had access to a lot of the documents they left when they came back, their mission reports and so on. And, you're left with a feeling, my God. And I was also very interested to find some of the American women who you would never think, girls coming out of the Midwest were going to go off and do this, but they did. And they came to England, they were trained, and they went off they were flown into occupied Europe. And the stories, there are just so many things they did. They would, when the Germans were getting ready to advance to defend the, before D-Day, they blew up trains carrying troops to be ready for D-Day. They killed a lot of people, blowing up trains with bombs, they were amazing. And there's a lot about them which you have to admire because some were married, some left behind children, some left, of course, husbands who were killed in the war, but they went off themselves and they said goodbye to their kids. And some of the letters they wrote, the one thing they had to do before they went on a mission, they were asked, please do your will and tell us who gets, your belongings. And they did this just before they went out from the airfield. They wrote, they signed their will and so on. And those wills are very moving to read in a sense because they tell you how much, how brave they were. So that's the book I'm working on. I've been working on for, 3 years now, I think, actually. But The Pope's Jews is still there. It's working away. There's a Hollywood producer, Jim Hall, who is interested in this one.
This is your last book, The Pope's Jews, the Vatican's secret plan to save Jews from the Nazis.
The thing is, of course, Gideon Spies is a new edition coming next month.
Oh, really?
Yep. I've had to do as well since since we last spoke. I've been asked to update it. So there's an extra. It's nearly 800 pages now, plus 800 pages actually. It's a big tome, but it's coming from St. Martin's Press next month. And what it deals with, of course, is Mossad today, really today. And I've been lucky to get the profile of the new Mossad chief, Tammy Pardo, and shape him out. And he's a very interesting character. And some of and how they've assembled their own network within the Middle East, and that includes the head of intelligence for Jordan, the head of intelligence for Turkey, and so on. And they have people now in Syria, in Iran, of course, Iraq and Iran. They're hunting people down. But it's their operations that I've told in this book. You'll see it, and it's, it's going to have quite an impact, I think.
Mossad has penetrated the intelligence agencies of a number of... I said Mossad has penetrated the intelligence agencies of some Islamic countries. Recently, Hezbollah admitted that a high-level Hezbollah intelligence official was a Mossad spy.
Well,
Gordon, what are some of the new revelations in the updated version of Gideon Spies that you can reveal to us?
Well, it's operations now. I have to hold off on that because they want to save it for the book's launch, and I'll be talking about that on the day the book comes out, which is in I think it's March the 20th, I think.
Okay, we'll have you back when you can talk.
Yeah, make a note of that then, because it would be interesting for you to see. But this new director of Mossad is very different to Meir Dagan. One of the things I deal with, of course, is the clashes with the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, and why he and Mossad don't see eye to eye in various things, and it's worrying.
I have never seen, in my recollection, I've never seen an open fight between former Mossad directors and the sitting prime minister of Israel. But these guys spar openly.
Yeah.
What's behind it?
Well, politics, of course, is the first thing. I mean, Netanyahu runs that country the way he wants to run it. He's a tough guy. But the people he has to prove the people he's putting in, but they don't agree with him on what he wants to do, and that's worrying. And they do clash, yep. And you'll see it in the book, because I've cited one or two really good examples of what happens. One thing that the last director did, Mayor Degan, who was a remarkable character, and is a remarkable character still, that just before he left, he picked all his favorite journalists, who are all based in Israel, and told them to come to a cinema with him, because he wanted to brief them. And the cinema was empty. They were put in, and he addressed them from the stage and told them why he was going. And my goodness me, that really caused a problem in Israel when it was leaked. He's quite a character, you know.
Are you following the controversy here in the United States regarding Mr. Netanyahu's planned visit to address the U.S. Congress?
I missed that. I'm sorry.
I said, are you following the controversy in the United States involving Mr. Netanyahu's planned visit to Washington?
Oh, yes, I am. Yes. Well, you know, he and the president don't see eye to eye, as you know, and they have serious background arguments, and it's a problem, because he takes with him now his new director, his new Mossad director, rather, with him on his trips to Israel. But it doesn't help, because the relationship between, say, the CIA and Mossad is not as good as it used to be, I can tell you that. And the same situation arises also with their relationship with the British intelligence. And it's a question of God knows how this is going to be resolved, because right in the middle of this, you have the whole ISIS business, which is absolutely terrifying. What's happening there, I mean, you know, is terrifying. Really
Gordon, through your network of intelligence sources, where did ISIS come from? How did they suddenly appear and gain so much strength?
They simply have a message that they're going to put this new caliph in. You know, this is the whole thing is about this. A land where they will rule, where Muslims will rule everywhere, you know. And then they introduce this character who's quite horrendous, I think. This is a guy known as, I got my notes on me here, I just blew out on my own file. They've got this guy called Jihad John. Now, this is what I'm going to tell you now comes from inside MI6, and they've let me use it, and it's quite interesting to read it. You know, first of all, Jihad John is from London. He's the guy who does the beheading. Mm-hmm. He's actually they've subjected his messages on tape to voice analysis, and they've concluded he comes from a suburb of London, in the south of London. And he's one of the extreme 600 extremists who he has helped to recruit, who have gone to Syria in the last year. And most of them have joined ISIL. And most of them are being trained to launch attacks against Britain, first of all, France, of course, and, of course, America. Now, what has interested me is to be told that there are a number of ISIL supporters in America, and that's very scary to think about as well. And I spoke, knowing I was going to come and talk to you, I spoke to Andrew Parker, the head of MI5, who said a significant proportion of who have joined ISIL are trying to direct attacks on the UK and elsewhere from Syria, using violent extremists here as their instruments. Now, he said, we've had 3 plots in the UK against London in the last 2 months. And death would certainly have resulted otherwise if it had been carried out. The thing is, intelligence say they've been able to stop those plots, and, they've done they have. We haven't had them yet. But this is a problem, is this, a group of Al-Qaeda terrorists in Syria are planning further mass attacks on the West, and that includes the United States. We are living in a state of war, in a sense. And that's quoting him. And, he's a very serious head. The government here have just voted £100 million cash to MI5 and MI6 to thwart what they call the lone wolf terrorists, who are all over the place. We don't know how many there are in Britain, but there's an awful lot of these jihadists who are causing us real score. And one of them is a guy who I managed to get his case file from and read, and then just get my notes where I wanted from it. He's a guy called Imran Kawaji. He's 27 years old. He's a weightlifter. He comes from the London suburb of Southall. And he has his own website where he posts videos of himself as in an assault training camp, which he takes you on a tour of. Unbelievable, but there you are, he does. And he displays a huge tattoo on his body, and he says that his whole mission is to behead people as well, if he gets a chance. And he's seen with this character called Jihad John, who is the sort of mass executioner for the ISIL. And I have also got a note here from John Carlin, who, of course, as you know, is the Assistant Attorney General for National Security in America. And he says there are now more than 18,000 foreign fighters in the Syrian-Iran region. They are drawn from more than 60 countries, and more than 3,000 come from Western Europe. That's the figures to think about, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Gordon, why do Western nations, including Great Britain and the United States, why do Western nations permit these jihadists to immigrate into their countries?
Well, that's a very good question. The answer is we shouldn't, but we do. And we have started here at long last to arrest them. A lot of these English jihadists go there, they train, and the intelligence people say they train and they're sent back to England to obviously launch attacks on us. Now, everyone who comes there says in the last, since Christmas, there's at least 30 have come back. They've all been arrested. They're all waiting trial because they've been trained. They've admitted they've been trained in these training camps. And I said, right, you're not going to escape too much. And this guy I just mentioned to you, Imra, he's one of them, and he's described how he was trained, which is quite terrifying. And, the thing is, I don't know why these guys are really all over the place. They're really in England, in America, everywhere else with this.
I mean, wouldn't common sense dictate that Western nations simply close the doors and say, no more of you coming in, and and the ones that are here, we're going to round you up and ship you out? That's
right. Well, you would have thought it's a common sense, but it doesn't happen, unfortunately. It hasn't happened yet. But the thing is, these videos, that English guy on the video who appears to be, he's a journalist, and he acts like a presenter of a travel show. He's just been airing this week another walk around a training school and telling you what's available to you and so on. And this is incredible. It is actually screened. I mean, I don't understand it. I don't understand, for instance, why the terrible burning of that pilot.
The Jordanian pilot, yes.
Yeah, in Jordan, was shown for his full length on Fox television. Why? What were we trying to do? It's. I've seen it. It's absolutely shocking to watch it. You know, you feel desperately sorry for the family, and thank God for the Jordan king and so on to really go. I mean, yes, at the moment, the average number of airstrikes they're launched by the Jordanian Air Force is between 15 and 25 a day. A lot of airstrikes.
Gordon, are Western militaries attacking ISIS strongholds, or are they attacking Syrian government strongholds?
Well, they're supposed to be attacking ISIS strongholds.
I know that, but is that a cover to attack Assad?
Well, it may, yes. Well, I mean, they may be doing it as well. I mean, today the BBC have had a remarkable scoop. They got the Syrian president to talk for 30 minutes. He's airing tonight, the show, the BBC are. And I've seen a preview of it. It's very interesting because he seems to be made his mind up, where he stands. And but he doesn't do anything about the ISIS at all, as all I can see. And that's going to be interesting.
But ISIS is there to destroy him.
Yes. But he's not really fighting them at the moment at this stage. It's terrible, the situation with ISIS. I mean, ISIS have said they're not going to just finish with him. But the one thing is, they're being very careful what they're saying about Israel, because Israel will just launch everything against them. And this is what is interesting about in Gideon's Spies. You'll see it in New Edition, what they would do. I mean, they will literally press the button and go for them. Now, the ISIS capital, as we know, is in that border town in Syria. And the answer will be, it's quite a big town. And they may just blow it up, literally, and that's where the beheadings taking place.
Gordon, from your viewpoint, is Barack Obama's foreign policy pro-Islamic?
Well, I have to be careful there myself. It's hard to say.
Why do you have to be careful?
Well, because, I talk to a lot of people who are in the intelligence business, and I have to take a bit of guidance from them on that, Obama's not widely regarded within the intelligence community that I know about. That I'm talking about Britain, Germany, France, or what have you. They feel that he's not really back in everything he should be back in.
Okay.
Is that your view?
Yeah, so he's not backing who he should be backing. All right, so does that mean he's backing the bad guys? Time for a commercial break? Gordon? You still there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's talk about his détente with Iran. Isn't this dangerous? He's cutting a deal with Iran. He's allowed Iran to.
Yeah, I mean, Iran have not delivered what they said they would deliver. I thought that business in Geneva would have resulted in something worthwhile. It hasn't. And Iran is ready to step up to the dime and say, well, we'll work with you, but, we've heard that before. Whether it's going to work, I don't know. The trouble is, it's very hard to judge these things at a distance. Mm-hmm. And it depends who you talk to. When I talk to some intelligence people, they have one standpoint, particularly those who work in, say, British intelligence. They have a very clear view what they want. And the result is, then they go to the government and they say, no, you can't do that. That's why I'm astonished that the government have now given £100,000 sterling to supplement their attacks against ISIS and what have you. ISIS is a walking fear here. People talk about it all the time. I'm sure it's the same in America. People are very scared of it because we don't know where it turns up. We don't know how many there are amongst us. We know there are many Muslims there are in Britain, for instance, and we don't know how many of them support ISIS anymore, but we do know that people do talk about it more than they're more fearful than you realize. And I'm sure it's the same in America, and it's certainly the same in France. I mean, what happened in Paris recently with the destruction of that magazine office is an example, I think. And people don't know. We're not getting the story, if I may put it like that. I mean, I know because I get requests from the editor to, you just play this a little more for my column, play it a little more gentle, when I say, no, you either take it or you don't want it, or we don't run it, and that's it. But it's difficult,
Yes, it is. Gordon, I've got about 10 minutes remaining, and I want to turn our attention to Europe and the standoff between the West and Russia over Ukraine. I'm following it very closely. Mr. Putin has made some very strong, pointed remarks in the last 72 hours where he has said he's not going to tolerate the West trying to dominate his country.
That's right.
He also said, his spokesman said, don't give Mr. Putin ultimatums, which is Angela Merkel reportedly gave him until tomorrow to accept the Western peace terms over Ukraine. And the response from the Kremlin was, nobody gives the president ultimatums.
No.
How dangerous is this situation?
Very dangerous. I must say that, very dangerous. What's happened, we are sending Britain is sending 100,000 troops there, altogether with everything.
The West is sending 100,000 troops?
Yeah, everything. They're going to be based around it. We're beginning this, Britain are founding this called the Ready Response Unit, who will be ready to move in maximum 2 days into action if any attacks that we feel are a threat. Now, the business with Ukraine is very dangerous because God knows what he's going to do, Putin. I mean, stories are appearing here which are really, really scary coming out of Ukraine and what have you. And what's happening there, the shootings, the killings, the bombings and all that stuff. The shooting down of that aircraft, for instance, what on earth was it? We'll never know the truth about that. But Putin himself, he's been compared to Hitler, he's been compared to Stalin and so on. And, he's not going to like that. And if he doesn't like it, he may decide to do something. Now, what can he do? We don't, our army, the terrible thing is, I don't know if you know, but the British Army is now down to 85,000 people, numbers. That's nothing.
85,000 troops?
That's the British Army. Our Navy is shrunk. We don't have the ships we used to have. And our Air Force is small.
Okay, two weeks ago, Russian nuclear bombers Tu-95
flew down our coast.
They came off over the English Channel. They were armed with nuclear missiles.
That's right.
Now,
that was a warning. That was seen by Cameron as the Prime Minister as a warning to us. Remember, we can do things.
Yes.
And they've been now. This is interesting about this is they've been doing these flights since last year. They mostly fly around Scotland, around the Hebrides and what have you, and they turn back. And then they came further, but now they've come further down. And then what they did this time, they came right down the Channel and flew round Ireland, then went home. And that is, they're saying, watch out.
Gordon, I was told that the Russian missiles were programmed with the what I call the dead hand technology, which is if Russia is attacked, the missiles automatically launch and take out the attackers. I was told that those missiles on those planes were programmed to strike their targets in Great Britain if the Royal Air Force jet fighters shot down the bombers.
Oh, I've no doubt they would retaliate or something. I don't know about the dead hand. I don't know about that. I do know that we put up our fighters very fast, but they flew close, and these big bear fighter bombers that they have, the Russians have huge things, as you've seen in the pictures. They just flew on, and they were outside the limits. They were 25 miles an hour, but that doesn't mean a thing. And they came down, and they flew right round, then went home again. And this is, if you ask some of the RAF guys, they say, well, this is good practice for us. And they try to laugh it off. But it isn't, because Russia's not playing these games for fun. And that's the scary point. And what's happening in Ukraine is also very scary.
Gordon, is there a shadow force in the world behind the curtains that's trying to instigate World War III?
Well, who could that be, you wonder? You see, you have to think, where's China in this? Does China have any interest in that? I don't think so. I mean, what interested me was that China are developing interests in the Middle East like anything, huge interest. I mean, they really have China have a real market in the Middle East where they operate. And as you'll see also, that includes Israel. They've got big business interests in Israel, which they're allowed to have, of course. But who else could it be? Who else could be behind the curtain, do you think, except possibly, of course, Moscow?
In Asia, North Korea has carried out a dozen large-scale biological chemical warfare drills in the past 2 months.
Yeah.
And the U.S. Air Force is handing out biochem warfare suits.
Yeah.
And hardly anybody's paying attention to the Korean Peninsula, but that one is boiling hot too.
It's boiling away, I tell you. I mean, that madman who runs the country, God knows, North Korea. But, I mean, how long will he stop before he decides to lob something over the border into South Korea? There's another, and that's another question you find is on the table to be discussed at these regular meetings of intelligence chiefs. What is interesting now is that, certainly since we last spoke, you and I, these meetings between European intelligence, Israel, and others, and the CIA, of course, are taking place at very regular meetings, at very regular times, not like months here, months there. And they are discussing options like this. And, war games are played in a sense of war games, that they say, well, what would happen if we do this or we do that? And this is all new. I've never seen it before like this. And, I speak now as a man of 84, and I go back to the war days, World War II days, and I've never seen anything like this before.
That's what I was going to ask you, because as a war correspondent, you've seen a lot of wars, and I remember one of my first interviews with you, 15 years ago or so, and you were telling me about your time as a war correspondent during the Suez Canal War. And what year? That was in 57, 59? What year was? Yeah.
So it's the 90s. Well, that was in 1964.
Okay, is that the one where you told me you rode a camel across Egypt to get to the canal?
Yeah.
That was 54?
That's a long time ago. But the thing is, you see, what's happening in Egypt now is very alarming, because Cairo is, it's under, probable erupt there. There's no doubt about it. ISIS are in Cairo. They've got their hands on that. And the Muslim Brotherhood, they've been kicked out, but I mean, that's, but they're a menace, and that's another thing we don't hear much about now in the newspapers in the West, do we? I mean, what happens in Egypt is a threat, and Israel know it. I mean, I always think a good barometer to see how Israel will react to this, and particularly Mossad. What are they doing now? Well, we don't know what they're doing now, so to speak, but they're doing something. And they have increased their force numbers. Mossad, when I began my Gideon Spies book, they had about 800 people altogether. Now they're up to 3,500 at least. And they have a lot of support everywhere. And they have a lot of agents everywhere. And they have a lot of energy everywhere. And that's why when the book comes, the book was published by St. Martin's. You should really book it with them, if I may suggest, because it will be something that your listeners will certainly say, "Oh my God, yes!" And it's all there. I mean, and you should get a copy from them yourself. And we should talk about it.
Yes, absolutely. We will definitely have you back when the book comes out. My final question, and I'm going to go back to what you just said a few minutes ago, that in your lifetime, you've never seen anything like this. Are we? Do you think we're on the verge of World War III?
I think we're getting closer than further. That's what I think. I think we are ahead. What's happening? Someone's going to do something that's going to cause a reaction that will really spread. And that's why you've got to watch ISIL, because we need to take them out. Somebody needs to take them out very fast. And that view is not my view so much as a view of Mossad. They've told me that you need to deal with that,
Mm-hmm. It's like a barroom fight. I mean, somebody's going to throw the first punch, and the next thing you know, chair legs are going to be broken over people's heads, stuff like that.
Or the window blown out.
Yes. It's an extremely dangerous time. Gordon, thank you.
It's a dangerous time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. We appreciate you being here today. It's an honor to have you back on the program, and
I'm delighted to be back.
We will be looking forward to the release of Gideon Spies.
But do make sure you get the new Mossad, Gideon Spies.
Absolutely.
That's one that'll interest you.
I'll tell you, Gordon Thomas has always been one of my all-time favorite people to interview. I remember one of my first interviews with him maybe 14, 15 years ago, and he told me about, as a young war correspondent for the BBC, he had to ride a camel across Egypt to get to a war. And I remember just sitting there thinking, I was in a diaper when he was riding a camel across Egypt. He's an amazing guy. I used to joke with him and say, I used to tell him, Gordon, I want you to put me in your will, but I don't want any of your money. I just want your contact list. I want the names and phone numbers of the people you know. He's got contacts in intelligence agencies and governments around the world. Hey, listen, on our app, under the app only button, we have put a classic 2006 interview with Gordon Thomas. It's there right now. It's about his knowledge of what China knew about the 9/11 attacks. You got to hear it.